So conflict happens. We are going to talk today about healthy resolution skills for collaborative workplaces. I am Samantha Strader. I am the Delta Program Manager at the Tennessee Coalition to End Domestic and Sexual Violence. And what that means, Delta is the Domestic Violence Prevention Initiative at the Coalition. So I do a lot with all different kinds of domestic violence prevention initiatives, from working with bystanders at college campuses, to financial empowerment, to working with a statewide leadership team to try to think about where our growth potentials are in the state for prevention. On the side, my side hustle, my side gig is that I am an LPC, a licensed professional counselor. So I wanted to bring in some of that expertise into this. So this is going to be very compassionate, very trauma-informed understanding of how to approach conflict in the workplace. If you have questions for me after this, I wanted you guys to have my email address and my work phone number that rings straight to my work phone. So if you have any of those things that you need, please feel free to reach out to me and contact me. Our objectives today, we are going to discuss compassionate skills for navigating conflict. We are also going to learn skills for emotion regulation and de-escalation. We're also going to learn skills for problem solving and healthy communication. And we're going to reconceptualize conflict as an opportunity to learn and grow instead of just a scary thing to avoid, which I think is how most of us think of it. What is conflict? So let's start with the definition. Conflict is a big word that can mean pretty much anything, can range from minor disagreements to, quote, prolonged armed struggle. We're not going to talk about prolonged armed struggle today. For the purpose of this training, we will understand conflict as any expressed opposition of views, needs, or beliefs. And with that definition, conflict becomes an unavoidable thing, right? In any space where two or more people exist at the same time, differences of viewpoint are going to happen. They are natural, common, and to be expected. So even if we have a fear or an avoidance of conflict, that's not very realistic. So the conflict is going to happen. Then our question is, our growing edge can be, how do we utilize conflict to become an opportunity? What we want to do today is understand conflict in a compassionate way. And what that means is we need to understand that people learn to communicate in different ways, from family patterns and from past relationships. These things are ingrained in us. They come with us, basically. And many people, most people, the vast majority of people just want to be understood. They don't intend to cause us harm. They're not maliciously out to get us. Most people are just seeking to be heard, to be validated, to be understood. We also can think about how all these different various sociocultural norms around conflict may impact how we communicate. So we might consider things like how men and women are socialized differently, men being told that being aggressive is to be strong, or women being told that we should be caring to others and always accommodating. These might play out in how we engage in conflict. We can also consider how various levels of cultural oppression can play out in our communication styles. If we are experiencing oppression in many ways, that's going to impact maybe how we have conflict and in what settings. We may have conflict differently depending on the setting and who we are having conflict with. Understanding all of these, how complicated it all is, helps us approach conflict with empathy and goodwill for the other person across from us. Conflict does not have to be a scary battle for power, though it often feels that way. When we are able to foster compassion, it's an invitation for other views and potential for creative problem solving and growth. I truly believe that we become stronger when we have more voices in the room, and even more voices that disagree. So how do we become welcoming spaces for voices that may be different than ours? Something I also want us to consider is that as we are working to build trauma-informed workplaces, I really believe that this compassionate understanding of conflict is a big part of that trauma-informed workplace. Many of you listening right now may be offering direct services to survivors of trauma. And what we talk about today can hopefully also help you navigate difficult moments and conflict and tension with them. And I also believe that creating a trauma-informed workplace means extending that to our coworkers, and if you're a leader in your organization, to the people that you lead. So even if you don't work with clients who are survivors, we need to know that each person around us is carrying something that we don't see, and it never hurts for us to be kind and compassionate, to view things through a lens of gentleness with anyone that we encounter. So this is a little bit of a restructure, I feel like, and maybe not for us who do this work, but certainly maybe for our larger culture that has kind of normalized bullying behaviors or like toughness and strength as being the highest pillars of what we are, and don't let anyone get one over on you, and don't be a pushover, and these messages that we hear, I think increase the at least the level of the conflict, right? Like it makes it feel a little bit more tense. And if we can come at it with this more gentle, compassionate lens, maybe we can take the edge off of that, which is going to make it a lot easier for us to navigate through these things. So I also wanted to talk about styles of conflict. So there are three of the most common conflict styles that are a little bit less helpful. And the first one is the passive style. So this is many people learn to avoid conflict completely, to stay silent, to appease others. These are our people pleasers. If you're in this line of work, you may fall into this category of wanting to help others and please others and appease others. I like this picture that goes with it. It's like a little ghost person with glasses. You kind of become the invisible man, the invisible person when you have this style. It can help keep the peace, but it also ensures that your own needs and boundaries are not advocated for or heard. It does not give an opportunity for those in relationship to you to repair or connect. So it's kind of this pros and cons, right? It's the pro is, yeah, you may be keeping the peace and you may feel like you're avoiding the tension of conflict because it can be really scary to enter into conflict. So you're avoiding that, but at what cost? You think about the cost is no one is advocating for you. No one is helping you stand up for your boundaries and needs. And often we can just expect that other people already know what our needs are. And that's not realistic. It takes a lot of courage to be able to voice what our needs are to others. So we're going to talk more about that in a bit. Then there's the aggressive style. So alternatively, some people learn that the only way to get other people to listen to them is with highly confrontational behaviors like yelling or intimidation. This often backfires and can cause many consequences like fines, loss of employment, loss of relationship, and actual escalation of the conflict and harm to others. So this one also backfires because we think, okay, well, if I'm yelling or if I am intimidating or if I am powerful, people will listen to me. But often people don't listen. They become defensive and they shut down and they do not listen to this. So it backfires, first of all, and second of all, can have some pretty negative consequences. Our third style is the passive aggressive style. So some people learn subtle and indirect ways of voicing issues like rolling their eyes or claiming to be just joking after stating an issue. This often results in needs and boundaries that are still not clearly communicated and is confusing and frustrating to others. I like this image, and as I was kind of looking into this, I saw a phrase that said the angry smile, and I really liked that phrase, the angry smile. We all know the angry smile. I used to be a server in restaurants, and we knew the angry smile well. And this is really hard for our colleagues or our friends or anyone that's around us to respond to because it is not genuine. It isn't honest or genuine. So it's very confusing for others and can be very frustrating for others. So something to keep an eye on there. So what we want to aim for is this assertive communication. Assertive means expressing your point of view in a way that is clear while still respecting others. Communicating in an assertive manner helps to minimize conflict, helps you to control your own anger, and also manages to have your needs be heard and have a more positive relationship with your coworkers, friends, family, and others. So it's almost like this is the middle path, right? This is like the middle ground between our aggressive, kind of scary communication style and our more passive style. We want to aim both styles in towards the middle. And passive aggressive is kind of a combination of both the aggressive style and the passive style. So finding your way towards that middle ground, towards assertive communication, is super key. So the tips for assertive communication can be to, and we're going to talk about several of these a little bit more in depth, but just for now, there are things like state your point of view clearly. I can have a bad habit of using a lot of words where I only need a few. So learning how to boil your point down into something more concise makes it a lot easier for other people to hear you. Actively listen to what other people are giving you back in response. Keep your tone even and your volume level at normal discussion levels. If I notice that my volume is going up, I'm getting a little heated, I need to take a breath and bring it back down to a normal discussion level volume. Keeping your tone even is really important. People can tell if you're being sarcastic or if you're being kind of mean in your tone. They can hear that, and that matters. So keeping your tone even. Maintaining eye contact, but remembering to relax your face, or if you're clenching your jaw, relaxing your posture if your shoulders are way up close to your ears. One of the things I do is my eyebrow goes way up on my forehead. So even if I am doing everything else right, my eyebrow is going to be way up. So I try to keep an eye on that and make sure that my face is relaxed. If you make fists, if you're a fist clencher, making sure that you are stretching your fingers. Anywhere we are holding aggression, it does two things if you're holding aggression in your body. One, you're communicating in body language to the other person that you are very angry, and that can be very scary to them, can also trigger them, can increase their anger. So you're sending them a message through your body. The other thing it does is it raises your own anger. Those physical cues in your body tell your body that you're getting ready to fight or you're getting ready to do something. So if you're holding that tension in your body, you're already upping the emotional ante. So if you're able to relax those things out, it has a physiological effect on your body. Different chemicals start going through your body if you are able to relax that tension out of your body. So that serves a double purpose there. I often tell people, if you're having a conflict with someone, sit down first before you do anything else. If you're sitting down, it's much harder for your body to get clenched and to get aggressive. And the next thing is to avoid extremes, words like always and never. If you find yourself saying things like, you never show up on time, you're always careless with your tasks. If you find yourself saying things like that, it's a moment that you need to take a breath and take a step back. Pretty much no one is always or never anything, right? We need to be able to be more nuanced in how we are communicating with others. Use I statements. I'm going to kind of scoot past that one because we're going to talk about I statements in depth later. And then the last one is practice, practice, practice. This stuff takes practice. Whenever I first learned these skills, this is true. I just had to practice it. I just had to pick safe people and start to voice what my boundaries were with them and make asks and say no and all of these things that we know we should be doing, but in a high stakes situation or with someone that we don't know or trust very well, it can be really difficult. So start where it's safe and practice. Another thing I wanted to talk about today is understanding triggers. And I think that our society misuses the word trigger a little bit, so I wanted to spend just a moment defining that word. It's not really a word that means like something that hurts your feelings, which I think is how it often gets used. A trigger has a physiological response in our bodies and in our brains. So a trigger is something that, even if you are safe in the moment, can remind you of a time that you're not safe or make you feel very much like you're not safe, which then makes your body have a response. And your brain kind of switches from being its normal, being able to think and plan self into survival mode. So you know a trigger because you feel it in your body. You feel yourself tense, you feel yourself freeze, you feel yourself get ready to fight. Depending on what your response is, will depend on how it feels in your body. But learning how that works for you is super important. What makes you angry? What pushes your buttons? How do you respond in those moments? Do you blow up? Do you shut down? And our responses are fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And in case you guys haven't heard of all four of those, fight and flight are pretty common. They are the responses that we are most taught about. When you're in that survival mode, do you get angry and want to aggressively come at the threat, or do you want to run away from the threat? Third one that we have learned about is freeze. Do you just kind of completely stop and freeze? I have a funny story about freeze. My neighbor is a real practical joker, and she had gotten like a cardboard cutout of a big scary wrestler man. I don't even know who it was. And she put it right outside of my door, knowing that at 5 a.m. I have to let the cat outside. So I walk up to my door, half asleep, let my cat outside, open the door, and there's a big scary man 2 inches from my face. I froze. I just completely froze. I didn't choose to. I didn't logically in my brain be like, oh, I'm going to freeze right now. I just did. That was what my body and my brain decided to do in that moment of fear. If it was real life, that would not have been an action I would have chosen. I would rather have fought off or ran away and closed the door, but I didn't. So I was very lucky that it was only a cardboard cutout. But it was such a perfect example of our freeze response and how we don't choose these things. These things kind of happen to us. And then fawn is the last one where it's kind of a newer one. Fawn is a response to a stress threat where we try to appease the threat. We try to appease or placate, calm down the threat. We become very docile and just nice and accommodating. So those are kind of our four responses, and understanding your own response is very key and important. How do these relate to our communication styles? If you're prone to a fight response, are you also a more aggressive communicator during conflict? If you fly or fawn, are you more passive? Are you more likely to shut down during a conflict? Are you more likely to just completely check out and avoid conflict? So understanding how these things are related is super helpful. If we can understand our triggers, we can manage our triggers. If we can manage our triggers, we're more likely to be able to get towards that assertive communication style that we want to. So, to the extent that you are safe and able to, it can be helpful to communicate once you have the insight into what these triggers are, to be able to communicate that to the people around you so they can understand your specific needs and boundaries. So I have an example sentence here. My previous boss was very passive aggressive, and it made me feel pretty unsure if I was doing a good job sometimes. I would prefer direct feedback and communication whenever possible. That is like a perfect statement, right? And we may not always be able to get to that. If you don't want to share all of that, or if it's not safe to, or you don't feel safe to, simply stating your boundary or need is totally appropriate. So, especially if you can use your I statements. So, I respond best to calm, direct feedback is totally appropriate. There you have expressed your need, you have expressed a boundary, totally appropriate. And it is helpful for everyone involved. If I'm your boss and I now know that, I can be mindful of okay, this person doesn't need me to totally avoid feedback at all, or definitely doesn't need me to be yelling. No one does. So I know that now I can respond better to that. It's helpful to know our own triggers and styles so we can work towards assertive communication. I wanted to talk a little bit about understanding anger. Anger is the guard dog of our vulnerability. Anger tells us when someone has violated a boundary or warns us that someone we care about, or something we care about either seems to be or actually is threatened. So anger serves a purpose, right? I don't want to vilify or demonize anger at all. Anger is absolutely adaptive, is absolutely necessary. It serves definitely a purpose. I think of anger literally as like my little pit bull that stands by my side and barks to help me notice something is wrong. But like a good guard dog, once I've noticed the thing, I need that guard dog to be quiet so I can now attend to the need. So that's how I think of my anger. And so often when I feel anger, I feel it, I thank it, and then I try to calm it and shush it so that I can get curious and notice what's underneath it. Because underneath of our anger is typically a deeper, more vulnerable emotion or need. And identifying that will help us communicate effectively with important others, right? So my example with this is kind of a stereotypical one, and it's not really a workplace one, but if I'm a mother of a teenager, and my teenager comes home well past curfew, 2 hours past curfew, I'm angry. And I could respond by saying, like, you never listen to me. You're so disrespectful. You never follow the rules. And already I'm breaking several rules, right? I'm using always and nevers. I'm not using my I statements. I'm using you statements. How is that teenager going to respond? They're probably going to respond defensively and also with anger and say, like, you're just a tyrant. I don't want to live in your house anymore. I can't wait till I'm on my own. And then there's door slamming and we're not on the same page and we're not problem solving. If instead I can notice that I'm angry and then get really curious, what's underneath my anger? Well, what's underneath my anger is worry. I'm worried. I'm scared. I'm probably annoyed a little, my child is not respecting my rules. So I'm having all these other emotions that are going on. Most important of which is probably worry and concern. So if instead, when my child comes home, I'm able to say, I was so worried about you. That really scared me. Can we come together and make a plan for what we're going to do in the future so this doesn't happen again? Now my child is at least more likely to be able to communicate with me in a different way, right? Now we can maybe get to problem solving. So I'm not trying to understate how difficult this is. Anger has an absolute way of taking over the train. But if we can find ways to calm it, then we can communicate the need, right? The thing that's underneath the anger that's so vital and important. Coping skills for anger. Again, anger is a normal emotion. However, aggression is a behavior. It's a behavior choice. And separating those two, separating anger from aggression is absolutely important. I'm allowed to feel anger. I'm not allowed to punch a wall. I'm allowed to feel anger. I'm not allowed to yell at you about it, right? So that we need to separate anger from aggression so that we can make different behavioral choices when we feel the anger. Knowing our own triggers is so important. How does your own body feel when you are angry? For me, my throat closes up, my face turns red, my eyebrow is a big clue. Sometimes I don't know I'm angry until like my face is hurting because my eyebrow has been like so far up my face. What situations, actions, and words are likely to raise your emotional temperature? I know that if someone is dismissive of me or rolls their eyes at me or does something of that nature, it's gonna trigger, it's gonna like get my red up. I know I'm gonna be angry. So I know that if that happens, I already need to be practicing my techniques for calming my anger. And you are gonna have to try a bunch of things. If you're a person who experiences anger this way, you're gonna have to try many things to find out what works for you to calm your anger. Some people use distraction, listening to music, call a friend, play a game on your phone, take 5 minutes and do something completely different than whatever the situation is. This is much easier to do. So if you think of your emotions on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being like totally out of control, 1 being you're barely feeling it at all. if you're at a 9, an 8, 9, 10, it's going to be really hard to practice any of these things because it's already like overwhelming. So we have to try to catch our emotions when they're at like a 5, 6, 7, 8, which can be a little harder. We have to be able to check in with ourselves more often and tell what's going on with ourselves. The earlier you can try to practice one of these techniques, the better it's going to work. Taking a time out, completely remove yourself from a situation if you're able. Take a walk, run up and down some stairs, do some jumping jacks. Try to, again, get the tension out of your body, can be really helpful. Use silly humor. I'll tell you guys that this one is my go-to trick for my road rage. I have a lot of road rage. And I started doing things like if someone cuts me off in traffic, or if they do, you know, if they're driving crazy, or you know what my pet peeve is, my biggest pet peeve is when there's a sign and everybody knows that like the 2 lanes are going to go down to 1 lane and somebody just zooms past you in that 1 lane so they can cut off in the front of everybody else. It makes me angry. It makes me angry talking about it. So, but now whenever I see something like that happen, instead of letting myself get angry about it, I try to make up like a funny story about them. I'll try to be like, maybe there's a spider on their dashboard. And then I'll start laughing. And if I can laugh, my anger is just like gone. It just like poofs it away. So if you can use humor to make yourself laugh, that is so key. Be careful with this one. If you are in conflict with someone else and you start using humor, they can take it as like disrespect to what they are saying. And that can really backfire. So we need to be careful with how we use humor. But if it's something that you're using for yourself to calm your own anger, totally helpful and appropriate. It's been one of my biggest tools in my tool belt. And then there's relaxation, taking big, long, deep breaths, unclenching your jaw, releasing tension. Again, any kind of stretches you can do. All of these things are going to help potentially decrease your anger. And notice for yourselves which ones are working and which ones are not working. And then practice which ones work. On the other end of the spectrum, we need to understand people pleasing. And this is keeping the peace can come at a cost. Caring for others and feeling empathy are strengths. However, we can sometimes forget to advocate for ourselves, our own boundaries and needs. And sometimes this leads us to harboring resentment towards others. And then these resentments can build. And then we're going to explode on somebody and tell them everything they've done wrong for the last 40 years. And that's not as helpful as we would like to be. If we have not expressed our boundaries or needs, it can be impossible for others to even know what they are. So learning to balance caring for others and advocating for ourselves is key. So I'm going to go through some of these "are you a people pleaser" signs, and we're going to talk about some ways to try to move towards the middle. 1, you have trouble disagreeing. I feel like that one is kind of the culmination of all these others. 2, you apologize often. This is one where I want to give you guys a little tip. If you are an over-apologizer, this is something that I learned, and it's really effectively changed a lot of things in my life. If you're an over-apologizer, every time you have the urge to say "I'm sorry," try to switch it to a "thank you." And some of you guys may have already heard about this. It's so helpful. When you feel the urge, "I'm sorry," try to switch it. One of the easiest ones is if you're late for something, instead of saying "oh, I'm so sorry I was late," say "thank you for your patience. I really appreciate that you were willing to wait for me." It does something, it changes the energy in a really powerful kind of way. It puts you on kind of equal footing with the other person, which is nice. It also feels more genuine, I think, to the other person. I've gotten a lot of feedback that when you replace the sorries with thank yous, it feels a lot more genuine to the other person. So it helps you break a bad habit, or not, I won't say bad, it helps you break a habit that maybe not always so helpful, and helps to create relationships that feel more genuine. So that's a win-win. You have too many things on your plate, which is related to the last one, says you're bad at saying no, or you're not well equipped to say no. So this one is the solution is easy to state, hard to practice, which is start saying no. And I'll give you guys a hint for this one too. I heard this from a coworker, and it was the best way to say no that I've ever heard in my life. It was she had kind of a lot on her plate. A supervisor had asked her to take on an additional task, and she said very gracefully, she said, "Unfortunately, I will not be able to experience that today." And I just thought that that was really great. Just this, like, unfortunately, I will not be able to take on this lovely thing that you have given me today. And I thought that that was such a good way of saying no, just like not instead of just saying like, no, I can't do that, or no, I'm overwhelmed, or anything like that. It was kind of an unfortunately, I will not be able to gain this wonderful thing that you're trying to give me today. So whatever way to say that works for you, I think is a really great way to do that. So there's ways to try to start to move towards the center from this position as well. Now we're going to talk about specifically the steps for healthy conflict resolution. And this is an overview of the steps. 1, we want to validate what the other person is saying. 2, we want to always remember to use the word and instead of but. 3, use our I statements. And 4, have a concrete ask. Know what we are asking for from the other person. So this first one is validation. Try to find something in what someone else is saying that feels like you can empathize with it. Now, this can be difficult, especially when your own emotions are high, or if it's like just hard to understand where the other person's coming from. But starting with this can help us remember that the problem is the problem, not the person is the problem. So you are not the problem is the problem. It also serves to calm the other person's anger because it helps them feel heard and understood. An example of this is something like, I can see that you're angry and I can understand why. Or, I know that you have a lot going on and you're under a lot of stress. So my favorite example of this is I was with a colleague. We were going to do like a group, like a support group for a group of women. But it was in a part of town. We were going to the hospital, and it was in a part of town where there was lots of housing as well. And so we had to park in front of this person's house to get into the hospital. And this person came out of her house and she was very, very angry that we were parking in front of her house. And she started yelling at us, "You can't park there. This is not for you." Like, just very angry and aggressive. And I watched my colleague very calmly say, "Gosh, it must be so frustrating for you that people are always parking in front of your house." And this woman, still yelling, was like, "Yes, it is totally what?" She was so confused. But it took her anger from super high to like immediately just like down to a 2. And she was still a little bit frustrated, but she felt so validated and so seen. And so we chatted about it for a minute. She was like, "It really is frustrating. Like, people are never respecting my space and they're always parking in front of my house." And so we just validated, like, "Gosh, that must be really frustrating for you. We can totally move the car." But by that point, she was our best friend, and she was like, "No, leave your car. You guys are fine. You're great. I love you. Come over for tea," you know? So we had made a new best friend just by simply validating what she was experiencing. And that could have gone another way. That could have gone with us being like, "This is a free street. We can park where we want." And then it would have been an altercation, right? So validation is, I consider it almost a superpower. It is a wonderful tool to be able to use to increase our own capacity for compassion and empathy, and to help other people feel seen and heard, which will take down the anger of a situation, which will take down the volatility of a situation, which is amazing. Then we want to say and. If we do a but, it feels like we've given someone a validation and then we just take it right back away from them. So this can often backfire and actually makes people feel more invalidated. So we want to always remember to say the word and whenever appropriate. Then we want to use our I statements to express our own experiences. So this has a formula. I feel blank when blank because blank. So avoid I feel like, because you're just more likely to simply put I feel in front of a you statement. So I feel like you're a big jerk. It's not a helpful I statement, right? That's just it's a sneaky you statement with an I feel like in front of it. So be careful of that. If you find yourself saying I feel like you, then you're probably not following the rules completely. Try to use a real feelings word. Anger is acceptable as your feelings word, but if you want to challenge yourself and if you want to have a deeper kind of problem-solving communication with somebody, the more you can get to that underneath experience, the better you're going to be able to do that. So something like, I feel frustrated when you do not complete the task we agreed to because it places extra responsibility on me. Or I am confused by the directions because they seem different than the ones we received last week. These are both statements that are great. In the first one, it could easily be something instead like, you never do things and it's always coming back wrong on me, right? That's going to be a fight. That's going to be a different kind of conversation. Or the second one, if I say, you're always changing the rules at the last minute, that's gonna make the other person feel defensive, and that's gonna be a completely different conversation than if I'm able to use my I statement. Then we want to complete our thought. This is kind of like so there's a bonus at the front and a bonus at the back. The bonus at the front is the validation. The bonus at the back is being able to ask for your concrete need. So I need or would like blank. So these examples are, I need for you to communicate to me if you will be delayed in completing future tasks, or I would like to have the task outlined in an email so that I can have something to refer to. So an example of the whole thing is, I know, so this is our validation. I know you have a full plate right now. And there's our magic and. At the same time, I am feeling frustrated that the task is not completed because it's adding extra stress to the team. So that's our I statement. And then 4, the ask, I need you to communicate with us and make a plan for completing this task. That's kind of a lot of pieces and a lot of steps. They get easier as you practice, and it's going to create a whole different kind of conversation than the verses. Why is this task not completed? I told you I needed it done by today. How many of us have had a boss like that, right? Me, definitely. Or other statements that are aggressive in nature, or on the passive side, if we just try to completely ignore the problem until it's too late to solve. Here are some general rules for fighting fair. We're going to decide on a time limit. No more than 30 minutes, but that's excessive. 15 minutes is even better. The shorter we can keep it, the better. Because remember, we're wanting these kind of concise statements, a validation, an and, your I statements, and your ask. We want to do one problem at a time. We can't bring up, you didn't empty the paper shredder last week. No, that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about something else. We want to stay present, no compounding the problems. We want to stick to the point, no sidetracking. I know you're trying to tell me that I didn't wash the dishes, but you never help with the cleaning of the office at the end of the day, right? Like, we don't want to be sidetracking in that way. We want to keep it on one thing. Own your own feelings. So we're only going to use our I statements, talk about our own experiences. We don't want to be assuming what someone else is feeling. We also want to avoid blaming, shaming, criticizing, any of these things that are going to put somebody else on the defensive, not going to be problem solving. We want to actively listen to the other person. What is the other person's actual experience? These are super basic. No insults, name calling, belittling, threats, sarcasm, digs. These are all kind of abusive behaviors, so we don't want to engage in any of those kind of behaviors. No yelling, threatening, aggression, again, abusive behaviors. Use our timeouts. If we feel ourselves getting angry, if we feel like it's escalating, we may need to take a timeout, and that's okay. The other thing we have to do is let other people take a timeout, right? Like, sometimes somebody wants to take a timeout and we want to chase them down and be like, no, you're going to talk to me about this right now. We can't do that. We have to let people take the timeouts that they need. As long as they are willing to come back, we have to also, part of using a timeout is you have to come back to the conversation. You're not allowed to use a timeout to run away from the conversation completely. Don't mind read or attempt to assume what the other person's going to say or what they want. Do not interrupt. This one, I'll be honest, is a hard one for me. I'm an interrupter. So I have to slow myself down and take deep breaths and let somebody else completely finish what they're saying before I respond. Now, and when it comes to responses, this is a harder, pill to swallow, I guess is a saying. Unfortunately, just because you may follow all of these rules does not guarantee that the other person will. However, it does give you the opportunity to try, especially if everyone knows these rules ahead of time prior to the conflict. The responder, ideally, should confirm that they've heard what you've expressed and are asking for. And then they have their own opportunity to validate you, state what their own feelings are, and make their needs known as well. So an example of this could be, this is a response to the prior ask. So the example could be, I understand that the team is feeling extra stress and frustration. And then I have in a parentheses here, apologize if it's appropriate, or state how your behavior could change if it's appropriate. I am sorry that my behavior caused this issue. In the future, I will be more proactive in asking for help. Again, if you feel like the I'm sorry is not necessary, you could just skip to the I will be more proactive in asking for help in the future. Most people want to hear not just the I'm sorry, but like, what are you going to do differently? So if you can focus on the what you're doing differently, that's great. And then here's your ask. I felt overwhelmed by the task and did not know how to ask for help. Is there any way that we can break this task into smaller pieces for each of us to contribute? So this is now we're working towards problem solving, right? Now we have person A's ask, this task needs to be done. Person B's ask, yes, I agree. I'm feeling overwhelmed by it. Can we break it into smaller pieces? Now person A knows what the barrier is. Now we can start to make a plan. Can we break it into smaller pieces, or do we need to carve out some time for this person? So we can figure out, now we can problem solve. The other way this could have gone is, why do you never have tasks done on time? We needed this. I'm so angry at you. And then the person either shuts down completely or becomes aggressive in response, and we're still not problem solving. So this is a long, somewhat tedious process with lots of steps. However, it does get easier once you practice it. I statements have become like my default. I don't even have to think about it anymore because I practice it so much. It just is right there. Same with validation. I take a breath and validate before I do anything else. So these have become really ingrained in me just from practice, and the same can happen in your workplace. If these are just kind of norms and standards for how people talk to each other, then this can become, it doesn't feel so tedious with time. And it's so worth it. When you see how worth it is, that like you're having better relationships at work, your tasks are getting done better, your team is functioning better, it feels so worth it that it doesn't even feel tedious. If you are a supervisor or leader within your organization, you have the opportunity to lead by example. If you put these kinds of things into practice, your team is much more likely to use them. It is so important for us to understand how power impacts how we have conflict, especially in a workplace. If your employees do not feel safe voicing their needs and concerns to you, you can be sure that they're voicing them to each other and their discontent will grow. So just because someone is not coming to you with any kind of wants or needs or boundaries does not mean that they don't exist. It may mean that your workplace doesn't feel safe. So you may need to take a look at that. Fostering a safe workplace includes things like having a protocol or procedure for conflict resolution that is trauma-informed and compassionate. And as we're building trauma-informed workplaces, this is part of it. Once both parties have identified their needs in a situation, it is so much easier to come up with a solution. Having your staff trained in conflict resolution can be helpful. If all parties know the rules of fair conflict in the beginning, you have a higher likelihood that people will navigate the conflict successfully. A supervisor or other mediator who is neutral may be needed to help facilitate a dialogue if the conflict is not easily handled in the moment and persists past the initial discussion. Most places I've ever worked encourage us to try to work out things with each other first and before we go to a supervisor. So that's what we want. We want people to feel like they have the skills and the confidence to be able to navigate these things themselves. If we as supervisors need to step in, we need to remember how to remain neutral and how to create kind of the structure around which a healthy conflict can occur, right? So we need to know these skills. We need to know how this is going to be structured so that we can help our team navigate through it. Because it's hard when emotions get involved. These become really hard things. These are like easy to understand concepts, hard to practice concepts. So sometimes they need us as leaders to help them navigate through that. This is kind of our final reminder. So we're getting close to the end. So if you guys have questions, be thinking about them. Remember, Conflict doesn't have to be totally scary or avoided. It is actually unavoidable completely. It's going to happen. Just accept that it's going to happen, and then you're going to be more likely to be able to navigate it well. Conflict can be an opportunity to voice your needs, your boundaries, give people a chance to meet your needs and boundaries. Conflict is unavoidable. Disconnections and disagreements are natural. I cannot state that enough. What matters is how we reconnect and how we resolve them. Healthy conflict takes practice. You're not going to wake up tomorrow and be a master of all these skills. I am not a master of these skills. But in practicing them, I gain confidence in them and I see how they work. And the fact that they work makes me want to do them even more. Know that even if you do everything quote unquote right, the other person may not respond appropriately. But that does not mean that you should not have voiced your boundaries or needs. Your boundaries and needs are worthy of being heard and seen simply because they are your wants and needs, right? Like those are worthy. And that's kind of for our more passive people. Your wants and needs and boundaries are valuable, and we need your voice at the table. So I'm urging you to practice these things, to bring your voice, your very worthy voice to the table. Yeah, and that's a victory. If you can just do that, if you can just say like, hey, I have this want or need or idea, that's worthy. That's become worthy. Here's my contact information again. If you have any other thoughts or needs after this, please feel free to reach out to me. I see a question. I am being gracious or patient is often the excuse I tell myself when I'm actually being passive and letting issues go on for too long. Is there a line between being gracious or patient and passive? That is such a great question, Megan. Here's what I would say to that. There is nothing wrong with being compassionate, kind, giving, all of those wonderful, lovely things. I think that the line that I would think about for you is, when are your own needs not being met? When are the things that you value not being seen? And I think only you know that answer. There is a time for patience and graciousness. And then there's also a time for equally valuing your own peace and your own health, right? So learning how to bring those to the table, and that doesn't, bringing those things to the table does not mean that you're difficult, does not mean that you are needy or demanding or any of these things that you may have heard in the past. It just means that you're a human being with very worthy needs, and they have equal value to the person across from you, right? And so there are ways where you can bring your equal value to the table, and the person across from you should be able to also have graciousness and kindness for you. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? I hope so. Are there other questions, comments, thoughts, any kind of thoughts that you guys are having right now? Well, I encourage you guys to try some of these things out in the world. Go out into the world, into your workplaces, into your relationships, and try some of these and let me know how they work for you. Let me know if they're successful. And I thank you for your time. All right. You guys all have a lovely rest of the day. I will stay on here for another minute or two just to answer any last questions that may come through. Have a wonderful day, everyone.